receptive do you think normal people, civilians, are to high-quality music? Do you guys in your professional lives think that you're kind of preaching to the converted, you're dealing with specialists, or do you think that actually you can demonstrate the difference to anyone and that they'll really pick up on it? We'll start with Paul, because you must talk to an awful lot of people, I would imagine.
Yeah, I absolutely think everyone can hear it, and the way in is to play tracks that people know. So when people come here and they say, I don't really know about hi-fi, and I've got a Bluetooth speaker at home, and we'll put them in the sweet spots, and you'll play something that, a David Bowie or a Queen or one of those things that just is baked into everyone's DNA, and at considerable volume, and you hear it, and it's a revelation, and suddenly you realise, the space in these tracks, the reverb, that you didn't realise there were synths all over the intro. It's like hearing music for the first time. The other sort of element to what we're doing is we've just opened a shop in Mayfair on New Burlington Street, which just sells headphones and players and DACs, and it's the high-end gear. It's Astle and Kern and Audacy and Focal, and people come in and they'd spend £300 on a pair of Beats. They're not looking for a £20 pair of headphones, and you put the headphones on and you give them the iPad with Roon on it and say, just pick a track, and immediately it's like grins. And all of, we're very used to, in the hi-fi world, when you start talking about headphones, you're talking about impedance and the drivers and the planar, and we don't mention any of that. We can talk about that if you want, but for us it's just put these on and have a listen, and all you see is smiles. So I think there's it's dangerous territory to sort of say civilians, because I absolutely know what you mean, but people who love music deserve to hear it at the best possible quality. We've gone down this road of compression and miniaturization, which means the artists are writing, recording, mixing, producing, and then at the last stage, people are listening to it literally on their phones, on a speaker the size of a peanut, or on a laptop. Now, obviously, that's not what we're about, but given the chance to hear music in quality, I think it's a sort of revelatory thing.
I mean, that's the real challenge, is you can supply people with high quality, high res music, but if they're going to be listening to it on a crappy pair of headphones or through a computer speaker, then obviously they're not going to notice it. So how do we get people to be able to appreciate it? Well, that comes with either putting them in experiences with better sound quality and stuff. I mean, what I do with pitchback playback is it's not audiophile. We say very clearly on the website it's not audiophile, because we don't have access at the moment to incredible equipment like this. It's a step down from that. We're trying to make it a sort of everyman thing, but when people come and they listen to their favourite album in a nice room on a nice big sound system, and they feel the bass and everything, they come away and they say, I never get to listen to music like this, and I should give it more time and all that sort of stuff. So the experience side of thing is one thing, but then the other thing is good quality sound equipment becoming cheaper and more accessible, which I think will happen. It's interesting you mentioned Beats by Dre, because I get a glimmer of hope from that whole thing. Obviously, I think the majority of people are buying it because it's a conspicuous consumption thing, because it's a brand name. But they did try and weave in a message of, they're trying to sell it to people as this is better quality stuff. We all know it's, really not great and what it pertains to be. But the fact that some people are at least investing considerable sums of money as well into what is perceived as being a better quality product, it's doing good stuff at a service. But I think that is a good step in the right direction in a weird counterintuitive sort of way. If we can actually get decent products in front of people and bring price points down on stuff, I think there's a disconnect between the audiophile world and most people who are listening to music. It's how do we bridge that gap? How do we find sort of maybe products are in the middle, bring the price point down on stuff? It's a big challenge, but I'm confident that stuff will happening, and it is starting.
Yeah, we've invested a huge amount of money, man hours in technologies like Apple AirPlay, Spotify Connect. Now, 99% of the time, a dCS user isn't going to listen to music that way. But if that 1%, someone can walk in the store and play music from the phone or someone has a Spotify account and they can hear their own playlist and it converts them, then it's money well spent.
Enno?
I think one of the most interesting metrics in the music industry over the last few years is that of Tidal's user base, as they've grown over the last few years, they've consistently had 40% of their users opting for the hi-fi tier, so the £20 versus the £10. And I think the whole music industry perceives this metric as an indication that there is hope. There are people willing to pay a premium for something better in some respect. I personally feel like the challenge that we have collectively ahead of us is getting the whole world back up from lossy compression just to Redbook CD as a baseline. High res, whatever, not yet, because most people, the bar having been lowered by the original iPod, most people still think that's good enough. And so I think the challenge is, then the difference is not subtle, as we all know. If you go even from a 320 MP3 to Redbook, there's a substantial difference. When people experience that, they have a chance to, then they naturally, some subset are willing to say, yes, I'm happy to pay for that. But actually, I want to kind of loop back to an earlier question about video quality. And I think this is an insight I had here, so take it for what it's worth. If you look at the resolution, screen resolution, from the first iPhone to the current model, you're looking at 1,000x increase in resolution over those 7 generations or 8 generations. So that hardware, in terms of what it's capable of doing with video, has been accelerating at an insane pace. And the 10th generation comes with the same white earbuds that the first generation did. So in terms of its sonic capabilities, it hasn't changed at all. So you can see how the demand for better audio quality clearly isn't there. It doesn't follow. The equipment doesn't do it yet, until you get to the high end where we are here today, of course.
How receptive are recording professionals to making high quality recordings? Does the professional side see the need to make truly high quality sounding recordings, and are they aware of the importance of it to consumers?
Well, the quick answer is yes. To the first bit, yep, we've been doing 96K since 1993. And the first 96K release I had was 3 years ago. We got all this stuff archived and nobody showed any interest in it. Yeah, I'm at the sharp end, I'm at the agricultural end. I'm the farmer. I plant the vines, we pick the grapes and we stick them in bottles. Different people do it different ways. Different customers have different expectations, and I've got a way of working that I try and preserve dynamics and full bandwidth. But it's not always possible. But a lot of artists, particularly in the non-classical area, want quite a lot of intervention. They want plugins, they want compression, they want it to sound punchy, they want all sorts of things, which they're quite entitled to do to their own material. But at my end of the market, I'm not doing anything significantly different from what I've ever done. We record the highest resolution, which is sensible. The only high resolution thing we have, to all intents and purposes, dropped is DSD, because it is such a complete pain in the neck to do any post-production on. You can't edit a 1-bit system without converting it back to PCM. And the whole idea of doing DSD was not to do PCM in the first place. So we've abandoned that because it's such a pain in the neck.
So you've made a name for yourself doing very high quality recordings, but are other engineers like-minded?
I
Is
think
that a
probably
universal thing?
Anybody who's doing faster than 96K would be deemed a bit of a loony. And I have been. But the interesting thing is the LSO have just released downloads of some 176K material we recorded 20 years ago. They came back to me and said, have you still got the session tapes, because they were taped then? And we've gone back and remastered it for them and given them the 176K material.
And that
they
was
see the
originally
value in it
recorded
for them. It was
that
originally recorded 176K.
Right.
Because I was being a loony, I suppose. But in terms of storage space, unless you're doing multi-track, most of my jobs will be less than 8 tracks. So if I do 192K or 96, the file size for the complete project's still going to be sort of 25 gigs, which you can put on a USB stick you buy for 20 quid from Amazon. So it's not an issue of storage anymore. It was at the time, because when we used to go out to to Vienna recording, we would take a huge dash reel-to-reel tape recorder, and it was about 300 quid a reel for the tape. And the machine was so heavy, we had to get piano movers, 4 of them, to carry them up the stairs because the goods lift couldn't take the weight of the machine. So all that's changed now. Everybody just doing 96K is just going into a couple of menus and clicking 96K.
Do you do any processing on your recordings?
Very, very rarely. The only problem you get is some pieces of music will have one very loud crash, which is maybe when there's something like Damnation of Faust. I don't know if you're an opera fan. Berlioz's Damnation of Faust is 2 CDs worth. It's rather long. And in the second half, Faust gets taken off to hell with a huge bang. And that bang is, to my recollection, was 18 dB louder than anything else in the whole piece. So the first CD would have been peaking minus 18, and people would take them back to the shop because they think something was wrong. So I did goose the level a bit. And then when it came to the very loud bit, I found a way to crush it without it sounding like clipping.
It's just a digital process.
I don't do digital processing as a preference. I don't care for it. I find it sounds mushy, and I lose strings. I don't care for. But you can't please everybody. We did Shostakovich 11 with Rostropovich conducting, and some of that is very, very quiet for huge lengths of time, and then very, very loud. And one particular punter wrote to the LSO and said, "There's nobody listened to this before it went to the factory because some of it's so quiet and some of it's so loud." And we had an exchange of 92 emails. I remember the number because it's a good number, 92, that's Beethoven 7. And eventually, I just said to the LSO, agree to give him any CD he wants out of the catalogue and give him his money back. And his final thing to me was that he says, "This isn't nice music, easy to listen to." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, if you look at the score, it's not really meant to be music you dust to. There's moments when there's 6 Ps and there's moments where there's 5 Fs. And that's because Shostakovich had something on his mind. And it's not really my business to make it into a script from a carry-on." So you can't please everybody.
This is a Radio 3 have this exact issue in that they'll play long pieces with huge dynamic range, and people skipping through the stations. You can go past Radio 3 a few times before you hear the murmurings of it. Also, to sort of bring it back to what's played here, it's how far back you want to go in the chain. Now, if you're making recordings today, you can set out with a mission to record at the highest res possible. When you walked in, we were playing a track by Muddy Waters from 1961 or 62, which is an album we play a lot here. And it's, if there's 3 mics on that whole session, and, who knows what leads were used and what preamps and, the mechanics of that recording session. And yet it sounds fantastic and it's crisp and there's so much definition in it. And, that was not recorded in any kind of high def, and yet still stands up as a recording.